1045theteam.com presents the Fifth Round Podcast, and this, of course, is going to be a huge episode, guys. UFC 205 happened this past weekend. Huge card, big wins by a lot of important fighters, a lot to talk about here. Ian, tick us off, man. Obviously, we're going to start at the top. Conor McGregor gets a win. How big is this win?
That was historically huge. Historically huge. Conor McGregor, the first fighter in UFC history to hold two belts simultaneously, two separate weight classes. And he didn't just win the fight, Brian. He starched Eddie Alvarez. It was easily a 10-8 round in the first round, if not worse.
Yeah, I mean, Conor McGregor knocking Eddie Alvarez on his ass 3 separate times, stuffed his takedowns, just looked like a beast.
The takedown defense was amazing. That left hand and his control of the distance was absolutely perfect. What kind of power does it take to knock a guy down 3 times in one round, twice in the next, and finish him that quick? It was masterful. Everybody thought this was going to be a dogfight, and McGregor just came out and starched him real quick. Now, the implications from this fight are huge. Where does McGregor go? Does he stay at 155 and defend the belt? Does he go back to 145? Does he want some time off now after you saw his obviously pregnant girlfriend in the cage? Very pregnant. He's starting a family. Not to mention, the post-fight press conference, Conor McGregor wants more than just his paycheck now. He says he wants stake in the company. He wants a piece of the UFC. He deserves more profit than just making money to show up and fight.
All right, let's start before we go anywhere else. Let's just start off for the implication of the fight. So he wins. Now he holds belts in 2 separate weight classes. One, does the UFC even allow him to continue to do this, or do they force him to say, you have to fight in this weight class or this weight class?
They said, leading up to this fight, Dana White was quoted repeatedly as saying, well, he's going to have to give away a belt.
Yeah, I mean, that would only make sense, in my opinion.
But every time they've said Conor's going to have to do something, Conor flexes his muscles and goes, well, I'm the friggin' gift horse here. I'm the one that makes all the money. Yep. I do what I want. And that's that. He wasn't going to fight Nate Diaz for the second time. Well, he did. And
he definitely holds that argument, because after you see all the numbers that came in from UFC 205, they broke records everywhere. Madison Square Garden records, pay-per-view records. Everyone was interested in this fight. So he clearly has a beef there. But ultimately, you have to protect the brand as well.
Absolutely. If you ask me, I don't think he ever fights again at 145 pounds unless things go real bad for him at 155 and he's forced into it. I don't think he wants that weight cut. I don't think there's anything left there for him. I think he stays at 155. What about you?
There really isn't anything left for him at 145. But even his coach now is saying he wants the shot at Tyron Woodley for the 175-pound title. I mean, that's kind of nuts.
For me, that's not going to happen. There's no way.
Just sounds like his ego.
It's definitely just a bunch of talk. I mean, Tyron Woodley it seems interested in that fight, especially after their quarrel they had backstage at the weigh-ins.
Who wouldn't be interested in that fight? These guys get, at the top level, the champions and the top fighters get paid based on pay-per-view shares.
Oh, sure.
So for every pay-per-view sold, Conor McGregor gets $2.50. So it doesn't sound like much until you realize they sold 1.6 million pay-per-views times $2.50. That's a lot of money. Tyron Woodley's on the same pay scale, not as high, I'm willing to bet, but who wouldn't want to fight Conor McGregor? That's what Eddie Alvarez wanted when he said, I want Conor McGregor. I don't want to fight any of these other guys who probably deserve it more, even though they might be an easier fight. I want Conor McGregor because that's the meal ticket. That's where you get your money. Everybody in the world wants to fight Conor McGregor.
Well, the same reason Manny Pacquiao wanted to fight Floyd Mayweather. I mean, they both knew that they were going to get paid.
That's it.
I might go in there and get my butt kicked, but I'm going to get paid when I do it.
At this point, though, Conor's, to me, that's just talk. If he goes up to 170, Tyron Woodley is huge compared to him. He fought at 170 before. He did. But he fought Nate Diaz, who's a lightweight, at welterweight. He didn't fight a legit 170-pound fighter. Yeah. I would be willing to bet what we see next from him, if he has his way, and the UFC has their way, is going to be Nate Diaz challenging for the lightweight title.
That's if Conor gets his way, but Khabib definitely, after that win, deserves that title shot because he looked fantastic in that fight against Michael Johnson.
He ragdolled him. It was bad. It was so bad. It's the first time I can remember ever seeing in the cage somebody pounding on a guy on the bottom, stopping and going, dude, you need to quit. Out loud, telling him, man, come on, you just need to quit. And then punching him in the head 6 or 7 more times and going, come on, man, will you please quit? The ref's not stopping it. Really? He's beating him up that bad. He's begging him to just, dude, end it. I don't want to hurt you anymore. And then he gets on the mic afterwards and destroys. Khabib cut. I mean, it was hard to tell what he was saying if you weren't paying attention, if you're not used to hearing him talk because he's got an accent. But he crushed Ireland. Crushed them. I mean, Ireland, 35 million people. Russia, 150. Come on, Russia. Conor McGregor's a chicken.
Well, not even just on the mic after the fight. He was talking to Dana White while he was sitting down between rounds and saying, give me that lightweight title. This is nothing. This fight's nothing to me right now. Give me that title.
And before that, now you've got the problem. You get this log jam at 155. Eddie Alvarez, obviously, he's not going to get a rematch. There's too much of a blowout. But now, do you give it to Khabib, who now has come out in the last 2 days and said, if I don't get a title shot, I quit. I will not fight for the UFC ever again. That's his quote, not mine. I quit if I don't get my title shot. Tony Ferguson, obviously, he's deserving. He's close. He just beat the former champ, and he looks really good. And he's on, an 8-9 fight winning streak?
9-fight win streak. The first time in lightweight
Or do you
history.
give it to Nate Diaz? Do you want the money? Nate Diaz is the money fight. That's where you're making all your money. Nate Diaz, Conor McGregor, 3. Trash Talk Central. It's going to be great for the title at 155, finally, with the rubber match at the weight they're supposed to be at, or the two deserving contenders.
Well, ultimately, I think it's, there's been quotes out there whether Conor McGregor's, dodging people in order just to make sure he gets the Nate Diaz fight, because he knows the fact that that's also money for him. Mm-hmm. He just made a ton of money at UFC 205. If they give him Nate Diaz again, who he's already beaten, and then I get him at the weight class that I want, of course, I'm going to make a ton of money now again because that pay-per-view is going to just sell like crazy. So
at the same time, Conor's saying, I don't want to fight Khabib. I won't fight Khabib.
Yeah, it looks like he's dodging him.
But at the same time, you never know with Conor. He might just be building the fight up because say what you want about Conor, he doesn't duck the best guys. He fights the best guys. He just fights the best guys who make the most money, which is why he picks and chooses certain people. But he fought the champ at 145. To get there, he fought the number one contender. He just beat the champ at 155. It's not like he's taking easy fights.
So, well, let's look at this for the fact that you obviously think that he deserves that opportunity to choose who he wants to fight. For what he's done, I mean, you think he deserves that. At this
point, he's the champ. He should always have some say as to which contender. He should be given a real short list and told to pick from it. Personally, I don't think Nate Diaz deserves to be anywhere near a title right now. Not even close. His past record is not deserving. He's never been that good of a fighter. He just happens to be Conor's kryptonite. He's built perfectly to fight Conor and have success. He's longer. He's got that great jiu-jitsu game. His cardio's insane, and he takes a great punch. So he's the perfect guy. If I had to build somebody to fight Conor, it's Nate Diaz. Maybe tweak 2 things here or there, but that's the guy. That's the hardest fight for him.
Sure.
But it's also the most money. Khabib, I mean, we talked about it earlier in the week, Brian. Khabib's a tough fight for him.
Khabib's a really tough fight for him, especially when Khabib gets him to the ground. But he's going to have to eat Conor's left hand before he gets there. And Michael Johnson just showed a huge hole in Khabib's game by hitting him with that perfect left straight that Conor has.
Yeah, I mean, if you watch 205 and you saw Khabib throw Michael Johnson around like a child's toy, you know that when he gets his hands on you, it's over. Yeah, you're going for a ride. I said Michael Johnson was going to Suplex City, and I was right.
Oh, yeah.
It happened.
Yep.
Well, guess what? So would Conor, but Khabib's striking looked worse than when he left. It looks real bad, like rudimentary, terrible striking. Conor that's his wheelhouse. He wants to keep the distance, measure you, and at the game plan he ran against Alvarez, he has a real solid chance of knocking Khabib out. That's a coin flip fight. On the other hand, that Tony Ferguson fight, I think that's the easiest one for him right now. Not that it's an easy fight, but out of those 3, I think that's the one for him, but that's also a tough fight because Tony's got that reach. Eddie Alvarez was the easiest out of those 4 guys for Conor, and he already won it. And that's not saying Eddie's bad, but if I had to take Khabib, Eddie, Nate, and Tony Ferguson, I'm fighting Eddie if I'm Conor. That's the easiest one of the 4. Mm-hmm. From here on out, he's got a real tough road. He goes back to 145. That cut sucks. Mm-hmm. And he's fighting the champ, Jose Aldo. Again, we never really saw what that was going to look like because it ended so fast. or he stays at 155. I don't know if he can sustain the success he's had right now, but at this point, who cares? In contention for the greatest fighter of all time, no question already.
Oh, there's no doubt. I mean, he definitely, fought himself into that conversation on Saturday. And let's move from one thing about Conor McGregor to another. We talked about money and the implications on these fights from one thing or another. Now Conor's saying, okay, I've made you a lot of money. Now I want mine. I want a piece of this company because I've done so much for it. Now, the question is, does he deserve it?
In the short term, he's done more for the company than anybody. But, Brian, you know what I'm talking about. We've been fans for a long time. This company was around a long time before him. It had a lot of success before him. And when he leaves, it's still going to be here and be successful.
Yeah, stars come and go in the UFC, but the one thing that stays is the UFC. So, yes, Conor does deserve to be able to purchase stock into the UFC, but he's not able. He shouldn't be given stock.
So why would someone like John Elway be given a GM job at a place that he obviously did so well for in Denver and given that opportunity? I understand it's a little different because it's a job as opposed to buying stock. But
they've done stuff like that in the past. They're some of their greatest champions, Matt Hughes, and we're going a little back, but the Matt Hugheses, the Chuck Liddells, the Antonio Rodrigo Nogueiras, they're greatest fighters, the guys who took fights, never questioned, fought, and were Hall of Fame worthy. Mm-hmm. Those guys have been handed vice president of, filling water cups jobs, doing nothing.
They're the Joe Torres.
And they make a boatload of money to not do anything. That's the retirement plan the UFC gave those guys basically on their own. Now, since then, ownership has changed. You don't know what's going to happen with those. But that's one thing. That's John Elway getting a GM job. You didn't see Ronda Rousey, who, remember back a year and a half ago, Conor McGregor was kind of big, but he wasn't Conor McGregor like he is now. Mm-hmm. Ronda Rousey was the fighter. She was the one that everybody was tuning in to see. That was the one you saw in commercials everywhere. Ronda Rousey was it.
Yeah, but
she was as good as you got.
I do agree with you in that aspect with Rousey, but Rousey can make money in other ways. She can make money by being in movies, by doing commercials and stuff like that. You know that Conor, with his accent in America, is not going to be, Visa's not going to be knocking down his door to go do a commercial spot. And why would he, in his mind, he's saying, I've done so much, I've broken so many records for this company. Why do I have to put any more work into it?
Well, he made $40 million this year by his own admission.
Yeah.
Over $40 million. I don't think that's nothing. At this point, the problem is this is the fight game. And this is not the NFL even, where careers aren't that long. Yeah. But at least you can look at a guy like a Peyton Manning and go, okay, he had success in the early 2000s, and you knew unless something went real wrong, he had another 10 years. Mm-hmm. Well, Conor McGregor, I don't know how much longer he's got. It's the fight game. One, you lose a fight and you don't rebound the right way, and that's your career never hits that peak again. Well, and at the top, very, very most, he's got three more years, and then the UFC's losing him anyways.
Well, you're not wrong there, but I guess my question then is, he saw what happened with Ronda Rousey. He saw as soon as she lost, her stock went from, oh my goodness, she's the greatest female fighter of all time, bordering on top 10 fighter of all time. Now all of a sudden, she hasn't seen the octagon in 18 months, and no one's really talking about her anymore.
Oh, they're still talking about her.
Well, you're talking about when she,
it's not the same.
Not in this. You're talking when she's coming back, or if she can be the same fighter she was.
I'll give you
as
that.
Opposed to now, he's trying to strike while the iron's hot and saying, "Give me mine before something like that happens."
I think there are better ways and smarter ways to do it. I think asking for a piece of the company, you're asking them to do something for you they've never done for anybody else and cannot do for other people. Mm-hmm. And that sets a precedent that is not good. Ask for a broadcasting gig, ask for any other type of position with the company to make extra money. Absolutely. No problem. Hey, I want to be sitting cage side when it's not Joe Rogan and Mike Goldberg. I want to be one of the guys and I want to be making that money. Sure. But he doesn't want that. He wants the easy way out where he makes money for doing nothing. This is a guy who already didn't show up to media stuff. They have other guys like Dominic Cruz, like Frank Mir before he said some stupid things, like other fighters, Dan Hardy, who have gone straight into Fox Sports or into the UFC Fight Pass or into cage side announcing and made careers out of that and gotten good paychecks. If Conor wanted that, that's fine, but he doesn't want to work for it.
No,
he says my cage work is enough. Okay, that's fine, that's great, but that's not sustainable. And the UFC looks at it like that ain't sustainable income. Champions don't stay champions for a decade.
Well, I think that's what I'm saying. I think he's trying to get it now because he is the guy. He is the one everyone's talking about.
If you're the UFC, are you willing to sell yourself out and hurt yourself financially down the road for a 2-year?
So the way you're talking is you're assuming that Conor's still just one of those guys that isn't, he's being talked about as if one of the greatest of all fighters of all time, but he isn't there yet.
I think right now he goes down as one of the greatest of all time, but even the greatest of all time fall down eventually.
Mm-hmm. True, but if I'm the greatest of all time, I want to be shown why. Give me some reason why I've just shown you how great I am for 5+ years. Give me a piece of that.
But if he'd done it for 5+ years, I'd say okay, but he hasn't. Conor's only had a handful of fights in the UFC, and he's only done it for sustained as a champ now, a year and a half? Maybe 2?
And he's
not
in
Anderson Silva.
Everyone who isn't a UFC fan, because not only can he do it in the ring, but he can do it outside of it. You saw in press conferences, you see it in other places.
That he's going to, because there's been guys like him before, the Brock Lesnar's, the Anderson Silva's, the George St. Pierre's, who were the big draw, the biggest guy. Even Ronda Rousey, they were the biggest ones. They were making the most money, and they got special treatment, and they asked for some special treatment. They got some things here or there.
Sure.
But nobody pushed it like Conor did. And when's he going to just push it a centimeter too far? When's he just going to go a little bit off the cliff and the UFC's going to go, fine, done, hands up, I'm out. I don't have it anymore. I can't deal with you. It's going to happen eventually.
Does anyone push the envelope like Conor McGregor?
That's true. That's the thing. Nobody has. But he's now in uncharted territory. He's asking for stuff nobody's ever asked for.
He's reached the mountaintop, and now he wants to be, flown off the mountaintop at this point.
But when you hit the mountaintop, there's only one way to go, and that's down.
That is true.
We just witnessed the greatest moment of Conor McGregor's career, whether anybody wants to realize it, and it stinks, but that's the greatest moment of his career.
That's definitely the pinnacle, winning 2 titles.
He will never be as great as he was in the cage against Eddie Alvarez at UFC 205 ever again, because you can't. That's the peak. Nobody's ever done anything like that. There's no way but down, unfortunately.
Well, we shall find out, because there's a lot to happen. The Conor McGregor saga is not over. That is for sure. 1045theteam.com. It is a 5th Round podcast with Ian Ford, Brian France. I'm your producer extraordinaire, Brian Mariano. Now, guys, Conor McGregor wasn't the only story of 205. Let's move on. The one fight we all agreed, we were texting back and forth, was by far one of the fights of the night. And we all were talking back and forth of whether this fight should have been a draw or not. Let's start out there, Ian.
Tyron Woodley, Stephen Thompson. It was a crazy fight. We were, Brian and me, and you were all in a text stream freaking out like that was a draw. What did it mean, split decision?
Yeah.
We were talking about what happened earlier, if you want to break it down for him.
Yeah, we actually had it perfectly going into the 5th round. If Tyron Woodley won that 3rd round, he was fine. He didn't have to worry about the 5th round, but if the judges had it as Stephen Wonderboy Thompson with the 3rd round, then that 5th round was very important, and Tyron Woodley could not seize the deal with that 5th round. So that was just perfect.
Oh my God!
Perfect
and the 5th round was probably Wonderboy's strongest.
That was definitely his
Which,
strongest.
Let's be honest, that sways things for the judges. So the judges end up scoring it 47-47. 2 of the judges give it a 47-47 score, which the round winner always gets 10. The next guy always gets 9. The only way to get a 47-47 scorecard is for Thompson to win 3 rounds. So the judges obviously gave him the 2nd, the 3rd, and the 5th.
And the 5th, yep.
But Tyron Woodley won so handily in the 4th round, he got a 10-8, which means Thompson actually won more of the fight, which is insane. He won more of the fight. He won more time, more rounds. He did more over the course of 5 rounds, but Woodley managed to win the 4th so handily that it's a tie, which is, it almost never happens in the UFC. You don't see draws. You almost never see a draw in a title fight. Which
is crazy because Frankie Edgar had a draw in his title fight against Gray Maynard, but this one was at a completely different level than that. Tyron Woodley definitely did the more damage, but Wonderboy Thompson accumulated more strikes over the course of the
fight. And how Wonderboy survived that guillotine choke.
That was insane to watch.
Oh, my God. His head is beat red, like an apple, beat red. He's got to be so close to being unconscious that he's got tunnel vision. And he manages not just to survive it, but to be smart, tactically shifting his weight and sneaking his head out. I'll never. And
it was unbelievable to look at. I thought the fight was over there. I thought it was done.
I was watching it with my fiance, yelling at her, going, "This is it. This is it. The fifth round. Woodley's going to take it now Woodley's going to lose it now because he squeezed so hard.
Yeah,
all that energy out, and he has 30 seconds to recover, and he's back in for the fifth round. And Thompson's just having a field day in the fifth round. It was a crazy fight. And then to make it even worse, it's the first MMA card in New York since 1996 in little old Buffalo, when we didn't even have rules and things like that in the sport. So New York's never had a card before. The Athletic Commission for the first time has to score it, and they decide that 2 draws and a card for Woodley means a split decision, which it does not. So poor Bruce Buffer starts walking to the cage, and the Athletic Commission goes, no, come back. We think we wrote it wrong. Oh, no, we wrote it right. Goes up in the cage and announces a winner. Now, Joe Rogan's interviewing Tyrone Woodley, who's like, yeah, I defended my belt. And Bruce Buffer's like, hang on. No, they're wrong. It's actually a draw. Tyrone Woodley looks like somebody stole his puppy.
Look like Steve Harvey out there, for God's sakes. What the heck is going on?
I was so confused when Bruce Buffer goes, first one, 47-47 draw. Second judge, 47-47 draw. Third judge, 48-46, Tyrone Woodley. Tyrone Woodley wins by majority decision.
And I'm sitting there looking at it,
what?
A majority decision is two guys say you won and one guy says you drew. If 2 guys said you drew, 2 out of 3 said it's a draw. It's a draw. I'm sitting there texting you guys like, that's a draw. but that's a draw. So now they have to.
Like, what are you doing over there?
Oh my God! Everybody other than Tyrone Woodley now is of the assumption that this fight's going to happen again. It has to. You have to run that back.
It needs to happen. Except for Tyrone Woodley somehow says, nah, screw Wonder Boy. I'm going to fight Conor.
If that happens again, who's got the advantage? Woodley or Thompson?
That was. We were talking about this on the drive home when I was driving home, and
it's going to be.
We were going back and forth. It's going to be interesting.
Now the report out of Woodley's camp is, I was watching the whole fight, going, why is Woodley keeping his back against the fence? That's terrible. That's such an awful strategy. It pins you in where you can't move. Apparently that was the strategy, and it really threw Wonderboy off. Really threw him off. Because he had no idea that was going to... Nobody ever does that.
No.
So coming in, unless Woodley's going to change the game plan, Thompson gets the prep for that crazy game plan. But Woodley shot 1 takedown, had a ton of success, and never wrestled again. Yeah, he tried to kickbox with a kickboxing world champion.
His 5th takedown ever in the UFC, and it was successful, dominated for 2.5 minutes, and then never did it again.
And I got to eat crow because I said there was no way Woodley could kickbox with Thompson, and Brian was right. He not only kickboxed with him, he knocked him on his butt. He lost 3 rounds, but when he landed, he landed.
He landed hard.
That fight, when they run that back, I have no idea who I'm going to pick. I'm going to have to study the heck out of that because I just won't know. Who do you take?
I don't know. If Tyrone Woodley sets up a new game plan where he decides to take him down more, it could be a different fight. And like I said, Wonder Boy's lead leg definitely put a lot of weight on that. And if Tyrone Woodley was smart, he'd work on his leg kicks and dominate, just crush that leg.
Absolutely. Now, speaking of eating crow or knees, how about we move on to the old Romero fight against Chris Weidman, Brian? Huh? I told you you're going to eat it if Romero won. And what happened? I'll give you. Weidman had a couple takedowns in the first.
3 takedowns in the first. I know they weren't exactly...
They didn't actually get scored takedowns because Romero spent about 0.5 seconds on the ground for each one.
His ass hit the mat. I'm counting him as takedowns.
Second time around, a second round comes in comes Romero with the most thunderous, vicious takedowns you saw all night. And then in the third round, Chris Weidman goes sleepy with a knee upside his dome so hard that Romero flew across the cage as he kneed him. Skyscraper style.
That was also a perfectly timed flying knee because Chris Weidman was going in for a single leg.
And then to top it all off, now Weidman's unconscious with a gash the size of my palm on his head. Romero's standing in the cage, and Michael Bisping is standing up at the top of the ramp
flipping
at
him
the Fox
off.
Sports 1 booth going, screw you, bud. He says he won't fight him. Now, he says he won't fight him. Bisping has been outspoken against steroid users. Romero got caught. Now, it was deemed accidental. He got caught. He served a suspension. He came back and he won a fight and he tested clean. so far.
He tested. It was all of his supplements were tainted. So I got to give him credit for that. I mean, the guy's jacked out of his mind, so you can't tell.
If that fight happens, does Michael Bisping have any way to leave that cage not on a stretcher?
I don't think so. But if he somehow is able to take it into that third and fourth, fifth round, Michael Bisping's cardio is better, but it shouldn't last that long.
But an aging, broken Dan Henderson managed to knock him down and hurt him real bad in his first title defense. What's Yoel Romero going to do to him? He's going to rearrange his face.
He's most likely going to do it.
He's going to end up with
round.
2 weird miscolored eyes after that fight. That's what's going to happen.
Now, I do want to talk about that. Between the first and second round.
Oh,
no,
okay.
Yoel Romero.
Yoel's corner.
This guy.
He's got a history.
He's got a history of cheating. Well, allegedly cheating.
Explain what you mean by cheating.
This guy.
Well, you want to tell him? You want to tell him about the Tim Kennedy thing first?
No. Right. Get to this first, and we can retract back.
Yoel Romero poured water all over him right before the bell rang to start the second round. So the ref stopped it, so because he had to wipe him down. He had to make sure he was dry because you can't have all that water on you.
We were wondering because I know that you were watching it in a different place than me, and I'm sitting there talking to half of our friends like, what the heck is going on right now?
That's not all that bad. That happens often.
Well, yeah, because
not as bad as how he did it. He poured a whole water bottle all over his body.
That happens worse. GSP has been stopped for worse. The only reason people are paying attention and it looks fishy is what's happened in the past. He fought Tim Kennedy a couple of years back, and he got hurt in the second round. So
real bad.
They go back to their corners for the third round, and it's on your corner men to take the stool and leave the cage with the stool. So his corner men just leave the cage for the start of the third round, and his stool is still in the cage. And he's just sitting on it. So he's just sitting there on the stool going, yep, okay, what now? And the ref's like, but I need to start the round. You only have 1 minute, and your minute's up. He gets an extra 35 seconds. Mm-hmm. And he was hurt right at the end of the round, so you can argue that extra 35 seconds was massive, and then he knocks Tim Kennedy through the cage in the third round.
But can you really argue an extra 30 seconds as opposed to a guy getting a bottle of water dumped on him? In a grappling sport?
Well, the bottle of water is this is the way it happens. Is he dumps a bottle of water all over his head and all over himself. Now you're in that cage under all those lights. It's hot in there.
Sure it is.
So he's trying to cool himself off. His corner
wipes
him.
In the studio right now. Are you kidding me?
His corner wipes him down. So his corner takes a towel and wipes him down, but they do an okay job of wiping him down. He's still got water all over his legs. They wipe down his chest and his shoulders and everything, but his legs are still soaked. So the ref goes, no, not quite, and comes in and wipes him down.
Yeah.
Now, Romero's also a monster wrestler, and Weidman had no success in the first when he was dry, so I don't think it matters. But the spotlight's on you because you cheated in the past. So, I mean, it cheated or gamesmanship, however you want to look at it. It's a Bush League move, but it is what it is.
You're basically saying,
not up in here!
That's actually what you want to say there because, and I always question this even watching UFC when I first started watching with you guys, and of course boxing as well, to where a lot of the times they come in and they have the giant ice bags and everything, obviously to bring the swelling down and everything. But these guys have to be leaving their corners sweating like crazy, and then you just had this whole bag of ice thrown on you. So how hard is that to actually regulate? I mean,
they do what they can. It used to be back in the day, your corner men applied the Vaseline on your face. They rub Vaseline on your face before you get in the cage.
Yep.
It prevents cuts.
Sure.
They don't want you getting ripped open by the laces on a glove cutting across your face or something. They used to let the cornermen do it. George St. Pierre had a little screwy issue, and this is one of the greatest champions of all time, if not the greatest. His corner rubbed a little extra Vaseline on his chest and on his shoulders and stuff, and he got caught, and somebody complained. So now it's not done by the cornermen. It's done by the athletic commission employees, the cut men, on purpose. Mm-hmm. So, but you can only regulate so much. At the end of the day, after a round of fighting, you're so sweaty that the water isn't really going to do much other than cool you down.
Sure.
You're still sweating your butt off unless you're a freak and you don't sweat.
But you still need to be dried off between rounds.
It's so a little gamesmanship. I don't think it was as big a deal as people are making it out to be. It got a lot of attention because Yoel's got a history of doing stuff like that.
It's gonna continue as he moves on and keeps fighting because that's
Yeah.
You obviously at first don't think about it as it's a big deal until you're in there with a guy who's you're trying to grab onto and you can't.
Absolutely. I mean, nobody. people look a little bit different at a guy like a Pac-Man Jones or, God, back in the day, a Rodney Harrison with a cheap shot because they were guys that played dirty all the way through their entire career. People went a little nuts on Richard Sherman for one play on the extra point block the other day, or on the field goal a couple weeks ago.
We won't get into
but
that
then
right now.
they're over it. That's not going to define him,
True.
and it's not going to get as much attention as it would have if it was a Rodney Harrison making that move, because Sherman's not known to be dirty.
Not to get off topic, but you like Richard Sherman. He went to one of your favorite schools, right? Stanford? You're a big Stanford fan, right?
Don't even start.
No,
with
okay.
me. I couldn't hate a human being more than I hate Richard Sherman.
All right. 1045theteam.com. It is the Fifth Round Podcast with Ian Ford, Brian France, and of course, I'm your producer extraordinaire, Brian the Closer Mariano. Now, guys, there was a lot of extraordinary things and surprising things that happened this weekend, but I think the most surprising thing we can agree on is that Miesha Tate gets beat, 1, and 2, she calls it quits. Like, were any of you guys just as shocked as I was after this?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, we picked Miesha Tate to win this fight, and she did not look like the same Miesha Tate as she used to.
Like, I was up to, I got up after the fight, okay, well, whatever, we'll think about something the next fight. And I went up to grab a beer, and then I hear her say in the background, oh, yeah, I'm done. Wait, what?
It made a lot of sense after the statement. Mm-hmm. If you rewatch the fight, she came in looking, I don't want to, I'm going to be politically correct as I can here. She just didn't come in looking the same physical shape she normally looks. Mm-hmm. Not to mention, she looked flat-footed. She looked slow. She looked real shop-worn. She came in looking like a beat fighter.
She looked tentative, too. It looked like she didn't want to take a beating, but she also didn't want to give a beating anymore.
No, her heart wasn't in it. She looked like she just didn't want to be there. And then after the fight, you hear reports from her training camp that nobody knew. She didn't tell anybody, including her corner man, her fiance, that is in her corner. He had no idea. He's sitting there shaking his head as she's announcing it. You can see him in the background. Nobody knew, but everybody went, oh, okay. That explains this whole camp being garbage. Her not showing up early to workouts like she used to, not working at the pace she used to. And also, I don't know if it factors in or not, but she's never been able to marry Brian Caraway, who's there in her corner, and she might want to start a family, and she's getting up in years. She's a female fighter. She doesn't get to have a kid and just keep training, go to training the next day. She can't just be like, oh, well, we're having a baby and then go to training. It's not how it works.
No, especially with a fighter that's known for taking a beating and then coming back after that first round and giving it all she got. So she just has taken too much of punishment throughout the years. And even in the corner, while the fight between rounds, she was saying to Brian, I don't know if I can do this anymore. I don't know if I want to do this anymore. Yeah. So her mind just wasn't in this. And she should have just said before the fight, I'm done.
If this is the last we see of Miesha Tate, I'm sorry to see her go the way she did, because that was a pitiful fight. It was. Mm-hmm. At the same note, I want to show a ton of respect to Miesha Tate for being a pioneer. You're not going to see a fighter like her again. Any fighter that comes in and starts fighting now, and you're seeing a lot of crossovers like Holly Holm. Congrats to Holly Holm for being a women's champion. Great. But Holly Holm came over after Ronda Rousey made it a viable thing. Miesha Tate was there for fights, multiple, before Ronda Rousey. She started and got big in this thing and won a belt in Strikeforce that Rousey ended up taking before this was a viable career path. When she was doing this just because she loved being in there, and she was making $8,000 a fight, and that was it. She couldn't even have a life. She couldn't afford to eat and live normally. Had a part-time job on the side. She was doing it for the love of the game, and she's one of the last bridges left to that old school mentality left in the sport, and it's going to really suck to see her go.
Well, and it was interesting to see, especially like France, you mentioned, because you could tell during the fight that she was saying that she wasn't in it. And then she said afterwards to Joe Rogan that she reached down and tried to grab what she normally goes to have that extra little bit, and it wasn't there anymore. But Ian, you also mentioned that if this is the last time, because I also thought right after she announced this that this was really out of the blue. So who's to say that she can't come back?
I think she could. I think almost the way the sport changed for her. She won the belt. She lost it so quick. And I think she kind of just came to the realization that this isn't the same sport she used to be in. She doesn't like the media. She doesn't like all the negativity and the trash talk and everything. And it's not what it used to be for her. The fire's not there anymore. But this could be a GSP situation where the fire's not there and I need to go. And then in
She
2
needs some
years,
time away.
2 years, she's going, I want back in. And GSP is still faltering on it, but we could easily see her in a year coming back and deciding that she's back into it. She wants the time. She might take 2 years off, get married, have a kid, and then go, all right, it's game
I'm
time.
ready.
She's
Let's
back
go.
in. She's not that old. She's not young. She doesn't have a decade to think about it. But
No.
she's not that old that she can't come back into 2 years and do something.
Well, and you also look at that Ronda Rousey and her rivalry had to have taken a lot of mental game out of her step, because that was like 3-4 years of them clashing heads.
Sure.
And do you think it has anything to do with how the Nunez fight ended, where Amanda
especially.
Nunes hit her so hard that she shattered her face, literally needed surgery, broke her nose badly?
And then she broke her nose again in this fight.
It might be something to do with the fact that the competition is what it is today, and maybe it's not worth getting hurt bad anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So now, to get off of UFC 205, we only got a little bit of time left. There are 3 fight cards on Saturday night. 3 separate fight cards coming up Saturday night that are free. One on Fight Pass, one on FS1, and one on Spike TV. All on the same day. Good luck watching them all. 4 o'clock from Belfast, Ireland on UFC Fight Pass.
Yes.
Headlined by...
Gerhard Mousasi and Uriah Hall.
That's a rematch. Gerhard Mousasi is knocking on the door of a title shot. He's close. Uriah Hall is the epitome of a home run hitter in the UFC. He is Adam Dunn. He hits a massive moonshot or he strikes out swinging, and it's really bad to watch. Last time they fought, Hall got dominated in the first and had a highlight reel home run knockout in the second.
Highlight reel knockout. If you haven't watched that fight, go back and watch
Should be good.
First one.
Don't expect fireworks because I think Mousasi's going to be slow and steady and win that fight. But that's a free card headlined by that.
Well,
Fox Sports 1.
Vegas says that too because he's minus 600
Oh, yeah.
in this fight.
Well,
Good
Mousasi's
Lord.
on a tear, but he was also a heavy favorite last time. And Hall finished him in one of the best highlight reels I've ever seen.
Yeah, spinning back wheel kick to the kidneys or liver or something like that, and just stopped him.
Later in the day, you've got the UFC in Brazil. That is headlined by what, Brian?
That's headlined by Ryan Bader versus Rodrigo Little Nog Nogueira.
That should be a retirement fight for Little Nog, but we've been saying that for a couple of years now. Ryan Bader, on his last fight on his UFC contract, he's going to be coming into free agency after this, which means there's a lot of options for where he could go. Bader should probably take that pretty handily. Not a lot of names on that card underneath him, but that is going to be a fun card with
really
a lot
fun
of great matchups. It's one of those ones where if you just like the fights, you don't care about a big name, tune in and you're going to see some craziness. And then Bellator has also got a card on Spike TV with Michael Chandler defending his belt against the former UFC lightweight champion Benson Henderson. That's a big one. That is the poster boy. The poster boy, the guy replacing Eddie Alvarez in Bellator, and the guy they wanted to replace him while Eddie was still there against Benson Henderson.
Even while Eddie was still there, they were trying to make sure Michael Chandler was champ. But Eddie Alvarez had something else to say.
Yeah. Now, that should be a great fight. That's another ex-UFC guy against Bellator's homegrown guy. I expect to see the ex-UFC guy win yet again because they generally have the better talent, but time will tell.
Well, he's coming down after losing the title shot at 170, moving back down to his home of 155, where he did win the lightweight title in UFC. Now he's coming over to Bellator.
Now, we won't be
interesting to
here
see.
next week, as far as I know, because it's going to be Thanksgiving week, and I am not spending my Thanksgiving sitting in this chair.
Guys,
However,
yeah, I was going to say I love you guys, but that definitely ain't going to happen.
next time we're in here, we should be talking UFC 206, which thanks to UFC 205 losing 2 really good fights, 206 got them. Pick those fights up. It looks really good. That'll be a fun one, and I can't wait to tear into Kelvin Gastelum like I've never torn into anybody before.
And
That guy.
not only 206, but you know what's creeping up, guys, right here in Albany.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
UFC Fight Night in Albany, because you guys are going to be there, and I think I'm going to be there too. So
Should be a good time.
it's going to be a great time.
Great time.
All right, guys. Another great episode, of course. This is the Fifth Round Podcast with Ian Ford, Brian France. I'm the closer, Brian Mariano. Guys, of course, UFC 205 was excellent. We'll look forward to UFC Fight Night in Albany, and, of course, UFC 206 on its way. Thank you guys for listening. Of course, hit us up on our social medias. Brian France has got those taken care of for us.
Yes, sir.
The Fifth Round Podcast on Facebook, at the Fifth Round Podcast on Twitter, and, of course, on Instagram as well. Hit us up. If you guys feel like we should be talking a little more this or that, hit us up. Let us know. We're always on there listening to all of our listeners out there on what we want to talk about and what they want to be informed about as well. Because you guys kind of know what you're talking about, and I'm just here because I'm a pretty face for radio. So, what can I say?
I'll agree with that.
Definitely come ask us questions on our Facebook, Twitter, whatever you want. We'll answer.
And I'll try not to be rude.
Yeah, don't be an idiot.
Possibly.
Don't be an idiot. I will not answer because I'm an idiot, and we'll leave it at that. Thank you guys for listening, of course. For Ian Ford, Brian France, I'm the closer, Brian Mariano. This is the 5th Round Podcast, and we'll see you guys in the Octagon.